Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Honestly, it's really an honor to be here with you today, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Stefania Romano also for hosting us in the University of Venice as well, and the Regional Environmental Center for hosting me today, and including the MENA region within your academy. Today I'll be giving a very small presentation, a different perspective from Jordan. So basically I'll just go through the sustainable development and green growth from a conservation perspective. Then I've chosen 3 case studies just to put things into the first one would be from a big conglomerate in Jordan, how they're trying to be green, very, very briefly. And then the eco-tourism sector, which is a growing sector in Jordan, and the experience over there, and then a local community cottage industry type example. After that, we're trying to make sorry, my English is not very good, innovative initiatives bridging the past with the future, because I think this is one of the ways that really we can have a sustainable future. And then finally, we ask ourselves, where do we go from there? If we ask ourselves, what do we really mean by sustainable development and green growth? In my opinion, I think that it's the interrelationship between man and the ecosystems. So in the World Botanic Garden in Jordan, what we've been trying to do is to identify and quantify the carrying capacity of the land such that through the science and the scientific research, we can demonstrate exactly how humans as a species play an integral role in ecosystems, not only surviving, but actually thriving. Because in reality, we cannot separate the two, and we have successful conservation nor sustainable development, but through green growth, we can strike a relative balance between that, and it will always be a continuous dynamic process. But this can only be achieved if man is ready to make the commitment. We need that commitment. Because if we don't make that commitment, it is not Earth that will perish, but it is the future generations that will. Because our resources have become limited due to our neglect and mismanagement. They are meant to be recycled. There is no choice for us. And if we want to inherit for our children a secure and dignified, and here I would like to repeat, dignified life for them, then we must commit to green growth. And I can't stress that point anymore. Otherwise, we will perish on life, but on Earth, it will continue and it will always adapt as it always has, and we've seen that many, many times. Here we go through the first Jordanian-based conglomerate, which is actually quite a remarkable story, these are the case studies. It's the Noqol group. And really, it started by one man who came out of Ramallah in Palestine. And now they're a manufacturing company. And this was about 60 years ago. And I took this out of their website, and I'll give you a moment to read it. Because I really think it pulls everything together for the future. And it's one aspect of growing together means taking responsibility for using natural resources in the most effective way possible. This allows us to continue expanding in a safer, meaning not a group, and in a sustainable way, so that to that end, we have implemented environmentally friendly technologies in our plants, and I'll mention now what they've done. Basically what they've done, they have paper mills that produce, toilet paper and tissue and everything, which is a necessity in our daily lives, in modern daily lives today. They've actually they've only used pulp from renewable forests. And they've reduced the mill's water intake from about 10 to 15 cubic meters per 1 ton of paper production to 6.5 cubic meters per ton. And that's quite a lot if you think of it. And then in 2007, they came up with this initiative called the Zero Water Discharge Project. And as you know, in Jordan, we have very, very limited water resources. We're actually now considered the third most water-poor country in the world. Whereas when I first began, about 20 years ago in conservation, we were ranked as the 11th, and that was about 20 years ago. So from being ranked 11th to the third, that's not a good sign, and in a short time. So within their Zero Water Discharge Project, they began treating 1,500 cubic meters per day of industrial wastewater and recycling it back into their manufacturing. So not only have they saved water, but they're actually preventing pollution going into our underground aquifers. Now the second example I've chosen within the ecotourism sector is Wadi Rum. And Wadi Rum has been declared as one of the World Heritage Sites, Natural Heritage Sites. And for the longest time it was under the umbrella of the Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature as a protected area. And they were doing really, really well. So who opened their eyes to it was the Aqaba Special Economic Zone. And that's it's the authority, the political authority within that region. They decided they would take away from RCN because they saw the money coming in. And they thought, well, we can make money off of this ecosystem service. And once they did that, the value of Wadi Rum actually went down because they mismanaged it, it was trashed, and it stopped being sustainable. And it was unfortunate, but then they realized that after a few years, and not many tourists started coming, the whole value went down. So they asked the Royal Marine Conservation Society of Jordan to try and fix it, to fix their mess, which is usually the case, you think they can fix everything. So what we did was we actually are developing special criteria, like you have the green key. I don't know if you've heard of green key or the blue flag. In Jordan, we're developing a criteria, a system of certifications specifically made for camps. And it will be across the board on a global level, inshallah. And I think this is one of the really good examples that even a small country as Jordan, with very limited resources, in partnership with European entities, can come up with something for a better future. I really like this picture because it brings us to our third example. And this is the local community and cottage industry. If you notice on your right-hand side, it's a controlled grazing study area. And you can see it's thriving, and there's a lot of biomass there. Whereas on the other side, there isn't any managed grazing, and it's overgrazed. We took this, and from this we've developed our CBRR program, which is the community-based rangeland rehabilitation program. And basically what we do is we work with the local community. We started off in the Tel Oberman, where the Royal Botanic Garden is. And we started with 5 families. Of course, at the beginning, they were really scared, who are these people to come tell us what to do? And we had a lot of interaction with them. But when we involved them in the decision-making process, in designing the project with us, and not coming on top, from the top down, you can't imagine how effective it was. Today, they are our protectors, because we really believe that in protection, environmental protection, really can't draw a line and say, okay, you're not allowed to come into this area, and this is the area that's protected, and let's trash the other area. So within the CBRR program, we started with 5 families. And from those 5 families, they started training the other families, and it was a working thing. So we cut the umbilical cord between us as the so-called experts and then the families living in the local communities. They became the experts. We learned from them as much as they learned from us. We're taking and writing down their traditional knowledge to see how we can apply it. And the traditional knowledge here, I'm talking about the HEMA system, which is a 1,000 years old system for sustainable well-being. This is a very striking picture. It's Azraq, the oasis in Jordan. This is a photograph I found from the late 1950s, and you can see there's plenty of water to go there. So I ask you, the next picture I want you to concentrate on is this is what it looks like in 2006, let alone today. I always think visuals can really bring the message across. What we did with Azraq is really a good example of what we should not do and how serious the situation is that we have at hand. If we cannot educate our decision makers, and this is where the key is, we will not have a sustainable future. It is not only to work with small NGOs nor the conservation groups. They already know. We're preaching to the already preach. What we need to do is to reach out to decision makers who really can affect change in a positive way, inshallah. Over here, the one thing that most politicians and most decision makers can't seem to make the connection that if you do something in the river, you have to not take one portion of the river, you have to take the whole watershed area, because what you do up will affect the downstream. And they need to make these connections. They need to know that one decision, you can't take it lightly. It will affect everyone else around you because they are whole systems, and we have to work within the whole systems. Which brings me to the regional level. And if we look at the region and the political boundaries, it really doesn't make any sense. We have to break the barriers of political boundaries and work together as a region on a policy level, on the ground conservation efforts and development. Because what we do in one area, we really feel it in the other. And here, Jordan, as you can see, is pretty much the center of our region here. And it's affected by the political situation, it's affected by the environmental situation, and at the heart of all this, you have people just trying to make a living. And this is what it is. We want to provide for a life of dignity and security for our future generations. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to have you here and to learn from the experiences of the country, the region. I'm sure that in the next days you're going to be learning much more from all the other stakeholders coming from the region itself. We are from Morocco, we are from the Emirates, we are from Palestine, and I would say we also have decision makers. Yesterday I was learning from a high-level decision maker from Jordan how tough it is sometimes to say no.